At exactly 8 years old, this kid didn't just win a race, he broke a biological law of human biomechanics. He ran an 800-meter sprint in 2 minutes and 32 seconds. That is a time that completely destroys healthy, fully grown adult men. Coaches didn't just call him fast. They called his muscle development a literal genetic glitch. He was instantly crowned the undisputed future of Olympic track. But sprinting history hides a brutal reality. 99% of kids who go viral and break records before age 10 completely disappear by high school. Their bodies break down, the psychological pressure crushes them, or the rest of the world simply catches up. 7 years have passed. It is now 2026. Victor Jaimez-Solorio is no longer racing children. He's lining up against the most elite, fully grown teenagers in America. Did the fastest 8-year-old in human history survive the ultimate curse of the child phenom? Or did the system finally break him? Watch the final 150 meters of the 2019 AAU Junior Olympics. While the entire lead pack drops their heads and their running form completely collapses from oxygen depletion, Victor initiates a textbook monster kick in track biomechanics, executing a negative split. Running the second half of an endurance race faster than the first requires massive glycogen stores. Prepubescent bodies naturally lack this energy storage. They are biologically built to sprint and crash. Victor was mathematically defying childhood endurance limits. Look closely at his kinetic chain on the final curve. His stride length dramatically extends, and his arm drive locks into a perfect 90-degree angle. Competitors around him are flailing their arms to compensate for dead legs, but his mechanics remain perfectly intact, generating ground force precisely like a trained collegiate athlete. He crossed the finish line looking like he hadn't even exerted maximum effort, but forcing a prepubescent body to fire at this extreme neurological frequency is a massive biological gamble. When a child's muscles are already operating at an elite threshold, what exactly happens when their bones suddenly start growing? At 52 pounds and standing barely over 4 feet tall, the power-to-weight ratio on the track was terrifying. To hold a 4-minute and 58-second pace over 1,500 meters, a runner's feet must strike the ground with a force equal to 3 times their own body weight. For a child with that exact frame to produce and sustain that specific ground reaction force without completely shattering their shin bones is a statistical impossibility. When you map his split times from the entire 2019 season on a graph, the curve does not look like a talented amateur. It perfectly overlays the exact pacing strategy of a seasoned Division I collegiate athlete. He was not relying on wild childhood adrenaline. He was executing mathematical precision. Every single stride was a calculated strike, leaving competitors who sprinted too early completely paralyzed by lactic acid in his wake. But maintaining a professional physiological workload inside a third grader's skeleton triggers a hidden ticking clock. As the growth plates in the knees and hips suddenly prepare to expand, that perfect, highly tuned kinetic chain is forced to face its absolute worst enemy. When a prepubescent skeleton is forced to handle elite-level biomechanical stress, the human body eventually retaliates. This is the absolute curse of the child prodigy. In the history of track and field, the statistical drop-off rate for record-breaking 8-year-olds is 99%. The assassin that ends their careers is not a lack of talent. It is puberty. As Victor approached his preteen years, he stepped directly into the most dangerous biological window for a specialized athlete. During a sudden growth spurt, the femur and tibia bones in the legs lengthen at a rapid, highly unnatural rate. However, the muscles, ligaments, and tendons do not stretch at that exact same speed. This creates extreme, snapping tension directly across the knee and hip joints. For a runner like Victor, whose entire 2019 dominance relied on a mathematically perfect kinetic chain, growing several inches in a single year is a physiological catastrophe. The central nervous system suddenly loses its muscle memory. The elite stride that shattered national records at age 8 becomes completely uncoordinated and heavy by age 13. This is exactly how the phenomenon of early peaking destroys prodigies. Combine that with a brutal psychological toll. Kids who are used to winning every single race by 50 meters suddenly find themselves losing to average runners they used to lap. Their mental framework collapses, and they simply quit the sport. Victor was carrying the weight of millions of internet views and the label of a future Olympian, right as his own skeleton began to actively work against him. As the rest of his age group finally hit puberty and developed their own adult muscle mass, that extreme biological advantage he had in 2019 completely evaporated. He was forced into a survival phase. By age 12, the raw foot speed that shattered world records was no longer a guaranteed weapon. The only way to survive a collapsing biological advantage is absolute, ruthless adaptation. Victor completely abandoned the comfort zone of short middle-distance dominance and aggressively expanded his cardiovascular threshold. He moved up to the 1,500-meter, the 3,000-meter, and the grueling, unpredictable terrain of cross-country racing. In track physiology, transitioning from a pure 800-meter runner to a 3,000-meter endurance specialist requires a total teardown of the body's energy systems. The fast twitch muscle fibers that made his early races go viral had to be systematically retrained, forcing his body to build a massive, slow-twitch aerobic engine. Instead of relying on a devastating final kick on a perfectly flat, synthetic track, he was now navigating dirt trails, sudden elevations, and complex pack-pacing tactics over a 3-mile course. This was not a demotion. This was a highly calculated survival strategy. While other former child phenoms stubbornly tried to maintain their childhood events and completely burned out against late-blooming athletes, Victor was quietly rewiring his entire kinetic chain. By attacking longer distances, he neutralized the sudden speed advantage of his rapidly growing competitors. He forced the field to beat him on pure oxygen consumption and pain tolerance, areas where his early, extreme childhood conditioning provided an untouchable baseline. He essentially hid in plain sight, using the silence of his early teenage years to build an indestructible aerobic foundation. But building a massive engine in the shadows is one thing. Testing it in the high-stakes, ruthless arena of elite California high school athletics is an entirely different war. A 4-minute and 15-second mile. That is the exact physiological threshold where raw high school talent violently collides with elite Division I collegiate territory. In the spring of 2026, stepping onto the track for Apple Valley High School against fully matured 18-year-old seniors, Victor clocked exactly that. The California Interscholastic Federation's Southern Section is mathematically proven to be the most brutal, unforgiving high school distance running circuit in the United States. It operates as a literal meat grinder for early peaking athletes, but the data from his recent campaigns reveals a staggering stabilization. A 14-minute and 45-second 3-mile cross-country split, consistently running sub-9 minutes and 20 seconds in the grueling 3,200-meter endurance tests. These numbers do not reflect a fading child relying on an early growth spurt. They reflect a highly calibrated, mature aerobic machine. Yet, the most shocking metric isn't the time on the stopwatch. It is the tactical execution. For the first time in his entire life, Victor is no longer winning every single race by a 50-meter margin. He is routinely getting boxed in by tight packs of aggressive, fully grown runners. The profound psychological shock of trailing, of having to fight violently in the trenches just to secure a 4th or 5th place finish, is exactly the trigger that causes former prodigies to mentally break and quit the sport. But the massive cardiovascular engine he built during his silent years allowed him to absorb that exact physiological punishment. He's no longer racing against children who simply fade at the final turn. He's executing calculated negative splits against the fastest teenagers in America, proving he can suffer, absorb lactic acid, and tactically dismantle older athletes in a dead sprint to the line. However, stabilizing in high school is merely a prerequisite. The ultimate metric of a historical track anomaly isn't just surviving your teenage years, it is surviving the ruthless, multi-million-dollar collegiate recruiting machine. The NCAA Division I recruiting algorithm does not care about a viral 8-year-old's race from 2019. It operates purely on cold, biological forecasting. When elite university scouts analyze a runner like Victor today, they are looking at a massive physiological paradigm. paradox. He possesses the tactical maturity and aerobic base of a 20-year-old collegiate athlete, but his skeletal structure has already absorbed thousands of miles of high-impact stress before his 18th birthday. In endurance sports, the human cardiovascular system reaches its absolute peak efficiency between the ages of 24 and 28. Victor is currently entering the most volatile window of that timeline. The transition into collegiate track demands an immediate jump from racing 3-mile high school courses to surviving brutal 8-kilometer and 10-kilometer cross-country bloodbaths. The training volume violently spikes from 40 miles a week to 80 or 90 miles. This is the exact physiological threshold where stress fractures, bone density collapses, and catastrophic Achilles blowouts routinely destroy top-tier recruits. The metrics confirm he successfully defeated the curse of the child prodigy. He did not quit when puberty leveled the playing field, and he did not mentally break when he stopped winning every race by 50 meters. He systematically rebuilt his kinetic chain and aerobic engine to survive the California high school meat grinder. But surviving is no longer the objective. As he prepares to step onto the collegiate starting line, the biological clock completely resets. He is once again at the bottom of the hierarchy, a freshman forced to race against fully matured 22-year-old men. He defied every statistical odd to stay on the track. But looking at the brutal reality of NCAA distance running, do you believe his body can withstand the physiological damage long enough to reach the Olympic trials?